It's me live. It's Lisa. I'm so excited to see everyone. You all can see me. I am thrilled that you all are here, and welcome to the Difficult Callers Workshop. So we're going to dive into a lot of great information in a jam-packed period of time, so 30 minutes. So grab your pens, your notebooks, or if you're like me, a pencil, and let's get rocking. So first off, I hope everyone's had an opportunity to do the poll that we have there on the right side. It's really interesting to see how many of you communicate with your customers via phone, email, face-to-face chat, or social media. And we have some for social media too. So let me go ahead, and in 5 seconds I'll close that poll, and then I'll go ahead and broadcast those results. We have quite a few people here. We do have a chat going in this room, so if you have any sort of technical questions, throw that in there. Lena will help you with that throughout everything. And in the meantime, let me go ahead and broadcast the results to see who we have on the line regarding how do you communicate with your customers. So here we go. And so I just checked the poll to go ahead and broadcast that, and hopefully that came through to you. What we have, just in case that didn't come through, we have phone. We have 94, almost 95% of you communicate with via the phone with your customers, which seems very, very typical. It's fantastic. And then email, 45%, almost 46%, so about half of you almost actually use email too, which is great. And then face-to-face goes down to 17%, and then 10% for chat. And we do have almost 2% for social media, which that's of course going to be growing. Now here's something interesting. When I was at a conference recently, this was back in April, and they talked about all the different channels we have to communicate with our customers. And they said it's not necessarily that the phone is going to go down in interactions. What's going to happen is that the other channels are going to come up. So what I'm going to do throughout this webinar is I'm going to go ahead and talk a lot about phone interactions when it comes to difficult callers. So this is our lobby. I'm going to take you now into the presentation room. All right, so now everyone's screen will have changed, and we have our wonderful little superheroes there, and it says handling difficult calls. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, and you can see now that the chat's on the left side of your screen. So again, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw those into chat. We'll get to them as much as possible, and I'll probably be asking you for some input via chat also. So we're going to dive in first by looking at these 4 lovely people. So here are representatives, and you can see that they all have a very interesting. Are we good? Want me to turn my speakers down? Yep. All right, I can do that. Let me just mute them. Yep. How's that? There you go. All right. So I just muted my speakers for anyone that might have had some difficulty or some feedback or anything. So, all right. So let's get back to our four cute little representatives here. So you can see that they all look very, very similar, even down to the hair color. Now, what we want to stop and think about is, what is it that is important for each one of these representatives to possess in order for them to have outstanding performance? Whether it's a difficult call, a regular call, doesn't matter. What is it that they need to possess? So what would their eyes look like when they're on a phone call? What would their mouth be saying? What would their body language? All those different things. So, you know, we all start from the same scratch, and now what do we add in order to make them really perform the best? And so that's what we're going to be talking about in the context of difficult calls. So when we pop into here, the thing that really does make them different is their ownership. And ownership is a key word. In any interaction, there's ownership. And when it comes to a customer interaction, that's where the ownership is more on us than them. We want to make sure that there's not that much effort and energy that they have to expend in order to have that interaction with us. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So there are 2 sides to ownership, and these are the 2 sides that we're going to be looking at for the entire webinar. So first we have, what do you choose to own before things get difficult? So before things get difficult. So it doesn't happen just in the call and now all of a sudden I can handle it. It's some prep. So what are some things that's important for our representatives to be prepared for? What should they do to prepare with any call that comes in? She'll be looking at those, and I'll be asking you for some feedback on that also. And then the second thing we're going to look at regarding ownership is, what do you choose to own when things start to get difficult? So before and also in the moment when. So those are the 2 things. Now the first thing, like I mentioned, that we're going to be looking at first is, what do we own before things get difficult? So I'm going to share something with you, and this is something that I'm going to see if this sounds familiar. And it's something that I've experienced in my years of working with all these different organizations in different industries. It really doesn't matter the industry or the organization. This happens quite frequently, and I want to see if this sounds familiar to any of you. So I was listening to, when I listen to phone calls, and I always give feedback to the leadership team. And during this particular time, we had some members that I had been listening to in that meeting also. So this is what I said. I said, so with all the phone calls that I listened to for the entire day, I never once heard a caller call in that was angry. I never once heard a caller call in that was upset. I never once heard a caller be difficult from the very, very start. And as soon as I got those words out of my mouth, this one rep that I'd been listening to just poked right up, just popped right up and said, Lisa, you've been on a ton of my calls and you heard how difficult they were. So stop and think about what just happened. First off, we had what my statement was, no customers showed up angry. No customers showed up on the phone call difficult. What happened is that we turned them into difficult. And that's the thing that we want to make sure that our representatives get that connection, that they have that much wonderful influence. That is great influence. So now here's your first opportunity to jump into that chat box. So I'd like to ask you, what is it that representatives do or say during phone calls when you just go, oh darn, okay, that's what turned it around to being a difficult call? So what are those things that reps do? So go ahead and jump into the chat box, and maybe you're monitoring a call and you're like, oh darn, I just heard that happen. I'm not sure it's going to go well now. So let's see what's coming up. Yes, Melanie, lack of empathy. Good. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Deborah, say it's not my area, not my job. That's amazing how much that comes up. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Poor listening. Don't do everything they could for the situation. So Teresa, I know say I love that. It's such a bad thing though, isn't it? Because once you say good enough, then great is never in reach. Once you say good enough, great is never in reach. Monotone, uninterested, they don't care, and they sound like they don't care. Accusatory terms. Brandy, good catch. Those words, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Tone, another vote for tone. I love it. We can't do that. Very good. Lack of acknowledgement. Don't provide them with a solution. So nothing is clear there with that. Can't words again. that they say we're not miracle workers. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Over talking them. Defensive tone again. These are perfect. And it's so easy for us to delineate these, to list these out, and we just want to go, please connect with the influence that you have. Oh, these are good. Caller has hidden agenda and it doesn't come clear with the information. And Alice, it's such an interesting point because there's that co-ownership in that conversation. So it's important for us to pick up on voice tone of the caller and help say, let me ask you a few more questions of you. And that's such an interesting one. Focus on how we got here versus, Kelly, a mouthful, this is great. Focus on how we got here versus how we can fix it. This is enormous. And we'll be talking about something in a little bit that speaks right to what Kelly just put in there. Really good. These, absolutely, absolutely great. Now, let me share with you something, another experience that I had, and I thought this was amazing. So I was working, again, with a lot of representatives, and we were taking a break in a workshop, and someone came up to me, and she said, Lisa, I have to tell you that for a 2-week period of time, she said it was like a solid 2-week period of time when she was on the phone, she said every single call seemed to be difficult. And she said, then I realized that I was the only one on all those calls. And so she was really taking some ownership of that, which is fantastic. And she said she did 2 things. She said first she decided to make sure that she was smiling during calls, something as simple as that, as many of you have mentioned here, tone and smile helps so much with tone. And so that's one of the things. And then the second thing is that she bought a mirror. She bought a mirror. Jump in the chat box just really quickly. I want to see how many of you have a mirror at your desk, or how many of your representatives have a mirror at your desk. Just a simple yes, and let me just see how many. All right, keep going. All right, so we definitely have a mix. I encourage you, like right now, I can look at myself and see myself, which is, a lot, but I got to tell you, it definitely helps. So make sure, because whatever it is you see, you're going to hear. So when I look in the mirror and if I see grumpy, they're going to hear grumpy. So that's one of the big things to do. Now, there are two things, because remember we're talking about what do you choose before? What do you choose before things start to get difficult? Very good. So I'm going to talk about two things right now. One is, I know, this is an interesting quote that introduces this. Um, I'll tell you who said this too, which floored me because I adore, it's a singer. And she says, I'm not a mean person. Maybe I'm rude without being aware of it. That's possible. And this is a quote from Barbara Streisand. And just this amazing talent. And I thought this was, so revealing and so vulnerable to actually say that. And so stop and think about, how many times do we work with representatives and we're like, if you could just see yourself through our eyes, because this is what is often happening. They're sabotaging themselves. So what's critically important is for us to recognize, for them to recognize what sort of control and influence I have over myself. So they just, all the things that you listed up here before regarding voice tone, that's all those things that they use to self-sabotage themselves. Now, there are two particular things, like I said, that I want to make sure that I jump into regarding what do you do before the call gets difficult, to make sure that we're teeing the reps up to be aware. It's so key to be aware of yourself and how you're coming across. So here are the two things. Let me pop over. All right, so the first thing, one of my favorite guys, John Maxwell, and he says, people may hear your words, but they feel your attitude. Now, the power of that message is that what we feel sticks with us. That's the thing that actually stays with us. And so it's really, really important for us to stop and think about not only what am I saying to them, how am I technically taking care of them, how am I making them feel during the interaction. And then the second thing is purpose. And purpose is one of those things that helps you be strong. It is something that when you stop to think about, why am I here? And there are two sides to purpose. One is corporate purpose. What is the organization doing? What is the bottom line thing that the organization's doing? Is it to heal people? Is it to provide, what's the particular service and why? Why is that important? And then so that's corporate purpose. And then the second one is personal purpose. Why am I here? What does it do for me to be here, collect my paycheck? What is it? Then what can I do? And how does that make me feel? When we remember those things, we can draw strength from those. Now, also, let me show you. I'm always reading. You can probably see all my books behind me here. And this is a book. I'll put it up like this. It says, Why We Work. Now, you'll notice down here that it says, this side, TED. So this is a TED Talk, and I'll give you the author's name. His name is Barry Schwartz, and Why Do We Work? It's a quick read book, and it talks about purpose. Interesting research and things behind it. So these are two key things before we even get on a phone call. What's my attitude right now? What do I want it to be? How do I want them to feel? What should I do with my attitude? And then secondly, what's my purpose? So when things get tough, I can draw on some strength. Because I remember what's in it for me. All right, now let's continue our journey. The other side of ownership that we talked about is what do we choose to own when things get difficult? So there is some pretty interesting stuff I want to share with you regarding this. First off, stop to think about what does our mind's eye see? So when I'm on a phone call and the phone call is getting challenging, what do I see in my mind's eye? Do I see these things, or do I choose to see this? Help. One of the things to stop and think about is, can we help everyone? And the answer is always yes. And even if that person doesn't accept our help, we still can help them. And so if I look at in my mind's eye, if I see those faces coming at me, then that's going to impact how I sound and how I feel throughout that call, and that'll impact what I'm portraying to them. Or if I stop to think to myself, they've called me, they're upset, and the only reason they've called me is because they think I can help, and the great news is I can. And so when you have that mindset, that helps with that attitude. So when things get difficult, you just quickly jump into, I can help. Now, the next thing, and this is something that I just find so interesting. What makes a difference to reps' performance? Now, there are 3 categories of things that I'm going to share with you. 3 categories. And the first category, let me go ahead and get it up. There's a variety of skill sets, and this first skill set is the foundational skill set. So this makes a difference to rep performance. And this is all going to sound absolutely, yep, I see that. Problem-solving skills, yes, that they actually, like earlier someone said, that they don't do anything with it. They're not solving anything. Communication skills, word choice, and voice, and all those different things. How do I mold that together to help them feel the way we want them to feel so they'll be receptive and cooperative? Product knowledge, policies, procedures, all those things. Do I know that? Am I resourceful enough? And critical thinking. Do I look at things strategically? Do I help look at how this is going to impact them? So these foundational skills, critically important to rep performance. I know everyone agrees. Now let me go to the second category, because I said there are 3 categories. Second category. Now, this next category, this is all about the emotional quotient, that emotional intelligence. And it says flex to different styles. So is it an aggressive person, a fast-paced person? How am I adjusting my style to help them be comfortable? Persuasive. What am I doing to help persuade them to take the next step? What am I just stating fact, or am I helping to have a consultative conversation with them? Advocate for the customer. Am I actually looking at it as if, if this were my mother, how would I do this? If this were my grandmother, how would I be an advocate and a champion for them? So how do I do that with every individual call? And then, as someone said earlier, empathy. Empathy is so key. And the wild thing about empathy is that some of us, myself included, I'm not naturally wired to give empathy. And yet, I'm capable, and we all are. It's just important to recognize it. So here's that second set of skills. So those are the emotional intelligence type of skills. Now, here's the thing that blew me away with this research. So here's the next set. So here we've got resilient, concentration over time, takes responsibility, and responds well to feedback. Now, what this set of skills is called the control quotient, control. So how much control do I have with myself? Am I resilient? When things happen, do I bounce back? Or do I say, oh, woe is me, and start complaining all around? Concentration over time. So it's not just important that I'm able to have that one difficult conversation. How do I do that over and over and over again? And then takes responsibility. How do I own those conversations? Every individual conversation, making sure that, like earlier someone said, that we didn't do enough for them. Well, how do I take that responsibility? How do I make sure that I'm doing everything that needs to be done for them? And then the next one, and this is so key, responds well to feedback. Now, we all know the power of giving positive feedback to representatives, because we want to make sure everyone knows that they're doing great, so they repeat it, and also where are those opportunities, what can be improved upon. This is so key. How do representatives take that feedback? Is this something where they are more open to it, and they understand it, and they own it? Or do they get defensive? Or do they shut down? So how do they take that feedback? Now, here's what's interesting about this research, is that of these 3 sets of skills, so we've got the basic skills on the left, we've got the emotional skills in the middle, and then we've got the control quotient, the control skills on the right. This research says that of all these 3 sets of skills, the thing that really propels rep performance, you got it, the right column, that control quotient. So now I'm going to do a little I'm going to take a little deeper dive into a couple of these in all 3 of these categories. Alrighty, so let's pop into first communication skills. So remember, these are those foundational skill sets. So words, voice tone, body language. Of course, those are the things that we all have in order for us to really make our communication skills come to life. So words have power. They have the smallest percentage in a face-to-face interaction of the power of the message, yet they always have power. They always have power. And with voice tone, so look at that bottom colors, the color graph there. Do I want to sound formal or informal? Do I want to sound serious or funny? Do I want to sound mature or youthful? Do I want to sound technical, or do I want to help make this simple? So how do I sound? What sort of tone do I want to have with this? And it takes purposeful thought in order for tone to happen. Let me say that one more time. Tone starts with our thoughts. Now, I have a question for you, and I'm going to ask you to jump into the chat box. Take a look at body language and take a look at that representative that we've got that picture in the upper right-hand corner. Not me, on the slide. And she's got her arms like this. Jump in the chat box and just tell me, what's she thinking right now? Just what's your initial impression? What is she thinking? Oh, yeah, totally. I have better things to do. Oh my gosh, that's so good. Ah, exactly. All of these are negative, every single one of them. Now, here's the wild thing about body language. It impacts our tone. So everything that you've written here, like we have irritated, annoyed, that's exactly how she's going to come across if that's how she's sitting and she's on the phone. Our body language does two things. It portrays how other people see us, and they get a feeling from that, and our body language creates a feeling within us that impacts our tone. Very nice, very nice. All right, so communication skills, those are some of that foundational skills. Now, let's jump into something that uses all of those skills, those communication skills that we just talked about it, and it's a technique called AIM, A-I-M. Now, what this stands for is acknowledge, inform, and move it forward. Now, what this means is this. So you're on a difficult call, and the customer says something to you. You want to make sure that you're human with them, and that's what acknowledgement means. You're saying something like, this sounds like a difficult situation, or I'm so glad that you brought this to our attention. I'm so sorry that this happened. So that human, that's the acknowledgement. And then the inform. The inform is the technical part. You're going to actually inform them of what the situation is. So for example, some things like this. So I'm glad that you asked about, so the acknowledgement, I'm glad you asked about that. That is actually outside of your coverage, all right? And then you go into the move it forward, because you've just told them the no, you're informing them, no, it's not in your coverage. So let's say that's the situation. And you say, okay, that's outside of the coverage. We want to look at our words that we're using, make sure that they're clear and they're truthful and they're positive, and that there's a feeling there that we want to have in them. And then the very, very last thing that's so important is that we move it forward. We want to make sure that we move the conversation forward. Here's the key to doing that. Once you inform them of the situation, that procedure is actually outside of your coverage. And then move it forward could start with something like, so, Mrs. Smith, I recommend your next step is, or what's really the best way to move it forward is to ask a question. Get them talking about the next steps. So for example, you might say something such as, so Mrs. Smith, the next step that I would take would be to contact your physician about XYZ. Do you need more contact information for your physician? Do you need his email address? So asking a question that gets them talking about that next step. So for example, let's take another situation. So let's say that someone calls up and asks for, hey, can I get this overnighted to me? And, whatever it might be. And I would acknowledge, I say, oh, I'm glad you called about that. Let's take a look. And then the inform, say, oh, I see that the earliest that will be going out to you is on Monday, and then to move it forward. So I'm going to ask a question, go next step. Would you like for me to actually email you when that goes out, or give you a call? And so you're getting them to talk about what's next rather than pushing back on the message, the inform. Now, sometimes people can push back on that, absolutely, and that's where your inform starts getting stronger. So anyway, communication skills, the words, voice, tone, body language, and then this technique of acknowledge, inform, and move it forward, those are things that really help with those difficult calls, because you want to help move them forward. Like someone said earlier, you don't want to just talk about the history, you want to go forward with it. Now let's continue on to empathy. Interesting little cartoon here. How would you like it if the mouse did that to you? Such a great one. So empathy is all about human understanding. And the question to always ask ourselves, and this is one that I use because remember I said I'm not really wired to give empathy. It's not part of my primary skill set. Doesn't mean I can't do it. I can do it. I just have to be aware of it. So I ask, how would I feel if I were in their situation? What does it mean to them not to be able to get that overnight? Or what does it mean to them to, and then that helps me express empathy, and then to go into the inform and then to move it forward. So empathy is so key, and many of you mentioned that earlier too, which is great. Now remember, empathy has gotten us now into that emotional quotient skill set, the emotional intelligence skill set. Now, let's go into that control quotient skill set. And one of the skills there was resilience. So resilient. And you can see here the ability to become strong, healthy, or successful again after something bad happens. And I love the second definition, the ability of something to return to its original shape after it's been pulled and stretched and pressed and bent, which being on a difficult call can sometimes feel like that. So the bottom line thing to stop and think about is this: how? How do I do that? And that could be a very individual thing, very individual thing. How do I let go of that? There is, let me ask you if anybody knows this. There is an acronym, and it's QTip, like the things that you use, the little fuzzy things you use to clean out your ears. What does QTip stand for? See if anybody knows. I'll give you just about 5 seconds to pop in there. QTip, QTip. All right. So QTip stands for quit taking it personally. Quit taking it personally. Now that could be one of the things that could be just a mantra and something, you know, the more you say something to yourselves, the more you can get a great feeling from it or the feeling that you want from it. And this is actually something that was reported that nurses use this. You know, they walk in with a patient and it's a very challenging situation. When they walk out, they go to the next patient, they just say Q-tip. You know, quit taking it personally. And this is something that the more they say it, the easier it's for them to go, all right, next. Because the bottom line is every single call deserves our best, every call. And this, the control quotient, what's really interesting is that what research tells us, most people have it. Sometimes they just don't use it. So helping representatives know, you know, how do you bounce back? What is it that you do? And the other things within control quotient, such as being open to feedback. And so these are really important things to stop and think about when the things get difficult. So those 3 skills, what are my foundational skills? Am I using those? What are my emotional intelligence skills? Am I using those? And my control. And boy, it's great information regarding the power of being able to control ourselves, being aware of ourselves and controlling ourselves. All right, now, at this point, I know we're getting close to the time. There are going to be so many different situations. I was kind of poking back through here to see, I think a couple people have asked a couple questions here. So any questions that you have, you can pop into the chat box right now. I'll be happy to answer them. And also you can call and email us because we're happy to talk about any unique situations about this. So let me see if there are any questions that are going to pop in right now because we have a couple minutes. I see some typing happening. When is the next training? I can get on a flight at any time. So Tyler, you're talking about the next webinar? Because that's something that we will, we do 30-minute webinars periodically, live ones, and we'll make sure that everyone online today will get information about that. And they're usually 6-ish weeks from now. State that they tried to commit suicide. How do you deal with that? So that's a really serious situation. So Jillian, whenever I'm not sure what to say, one of the things I do is ask a question. Now, and being not familiar with the industry that you're actually in, if that's a frequent thing that comes up regarding committing suicide, I would say then you probably have some sort of procedures to do. But stop and think about whenever you're not sure what to do, and this is for any difficult call, ask a question. So, you know, I appreciate you sharing that with me, knowledge, and then ask a question, tell me more about that. So I would ask a question when you're not sure what to do. You're welcome, Tyler. And using profanity, and this is my weakness. All right. So when they're really getting upset. So what's interesting is this, is that when you use the technique like AIM, acknowledge, inform, and move it forward, that will help to diffuse the conversation, their emotions, and get things moving forward. Now, if they continue with like a personal attack, well, there's a 5-step process that ends actually in disconnection, because we want to make sure that we don't train, so to speak, our customers to actually berate us and stay on the line with them. So it could actually end in disconnection. Give us a call because I can explain more about that too. How do you handle customers who ask multiple questions? When you try to answer, they start asking more questions. That is so good. They just keep going because it's all about them on the calls, isn't it? One of the best thing is have a pen or pencil and jot them down. Jot them down. And make sure that those empathy skills are really in play. Make sure that human feeling is really happening. There is a saying, and let me see if anybody knows this. I'm going to say a saying, and then I'm going to leave off the last word, and you can jump into the chat box and see and tell me the last word. The saying is this: people don't care what you know until they know that you. Excellent. And so making sure that you continue to show that you care, even if they're acting in a frustrating way, because that'll help them finally become receptive and cooperative. So this is emotional skills. Let me see if there are any other questions. We're just at a minute here. All right. How do you deal with someone who's intoxicated and in distress? Again, I ask questions, and that's a really good situation, because those extreme situations, to have a procedure in the call center. Who would I call? What would we do when that happens? So let me go ahead and leave you with the final thoughts here. And so food for thought, some wonderful people. And this is the good news about all of this regarding difficult callers is what Maya Angelou says: you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. And then Dr. Seuss, only you can control your future. One of the best things, I'll leave you with this, that I've heard is that, with difficult calls, it's like, oh my gosh, am I going to have the strength, the energy to do that? Always remember, you do have that capability. You have this control, and that's the beautiful thing about ourselves. And there's a saying that says, fake it until you become it. Fake it until you become it. The more you do the behaviors to help you handle difficult calls, to help your representatives handle difficult calls, the better you'll actually end up doing it. All right, so I know we're at time. Oh my gosh, I've so enjoyed all of you being here. I'm so glad that you are here. Do give us a call, send an email. Be happy to respond to some specific situations. And I hope to see you again really, really soon. Thanks, everyone.